I'm singing Walking Away, and I look over, and who's singing Walking Away back? It's Stevie Wonder. I'm a journeyman. I haven't got all the answers. I'm learning as much as everyone else, and you become a teacher through your adversities. To be here.
Craig, awesome to see you. This book is fantastic.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, man.
Okay. Big decision to write a book. You talk about the fact in the intro to it, it's not so much a memoir. It's a reflection on the things you've discovered about yourself. But there's a lot of memoir in there.
Yeah, totally.
Kicking off with Terence Trent D'Arby, your first ever live gig. That says so much, doesn't it?
When I heard it playing as I walked in, I was just like, wow, Chris. Like, what a song to play. And when I watched him for the first time at the Guildhall in Southampton, I was just saw this guy like running across the stage. It had like Stevie Wonder in the vocals. There was Marvin Gaye in the steps. And I was just like, James Brown. And I was just thinking, wow, just to do anything like this would be wonderful. And then look, to stand here 22 years later and to have performed at the Guildhall, it just brought a lot of memories coming walking through the door there.
You talk in that answer about Stevie Wonder, right? I mean, you say you can't believe you're standing here 22 years later talking about Terence Trent D'Arby. You got your Stevie Wonder story. You got when Craig met Puff Daddy on the telephone. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Stevie Wonder one was crazy because I was in the House of Blues. It was 2001. And you have to remember, like, it was only like a year or so before that I was in my bedroom just making mixed CDs and tapes.
It was unbelievable, wasn't it?
Oh, so I did 3 nights there. And Kwame's here with me, who remembers that really well, my guitarist.
How you doing?
And the first night I'm performing and I look up and I see Missy Elliott and Jennifer Lopez and I'm like, wow. And I'm thinking, I've still got the Jennifer Lopez poster up on my wall at home, right? The following night, the Queen Bee herself, Beyonce, comes to see me perform. And I'm just like, I mean, Destiny's Child and Beyonce was everything. And then the third night, I know, and the thing is, when I tell the story, I sort of feel like I'm just ringing off names, but it was, I was 19 years old, and I look into the crowd, and I see everyone's like, there's a bit of a commotion, they're looking at one in particular person, and I can't quite see, and then the front house lights come up a little, and I'm singing Walking Away, and I look over, and who's singing Walking Away back? It's Stevie Wonder.
Stevie flipping Wonder, everyone.
And I nearly lost it, and I was like, you know what I mean? The melodies were starting to go, I was like, hold it together, keep it together, it's Stevie Wonder. I got to meet him after,
right,
and he'd come with Quincy Jones.
Oh my gosh.
And the real dime of the whole thing, outside of the fact of just meeting Stevie Wonder and Quincy Jones, is Quincy just very blasé mentions, MJ loves your album, he bought loads of the album and gave it to his friends. And I was like, and then he carried on talking about something else. I was like, whoa, MJ, let me just land what, you're talking Michael Jackson, right? He goes, yeah, he bought the album. And I said, listen, if all of this stops now, if it's finished, this is where it ends. I go home today, we're good here. When I came in, I just wanted to give a big hug and just to say thank you, because it was a real pivotal moment then, because I'd come out as the guy who sings garage music, and to do a song like Fill Me In and break it down acoustic, and to do it on a show as affluent as TFI Fridays, it was such a big show for me to come and do, my biggest TV. And to meet you and how gracious you were with me and how you held space for me. And after that performance, to see how it shifted into a whole different stratosphere where people were like, if they didn't really understand garage, they understood the song. Yeah. And it just landed it in a different place. And I just wanted to really say thank you. Because
well, thank you for coming on.
Reflecting 22 years, it's the rapport you have with people. I'm like, wow, Chris, man, what a journey we've been on.
Tell everyone about the moment when you thought your mate was winding you up, because he loved to prank you, and he said Puff Daddy was on the phone.
Oh yeah, so I had a manager called Paul Widger, and he's a lovely guy, and he was the first person who kind of saw me down in Southampton and sort of brought me up to London and showed me into record companies. So I had like a few songs that were bubbling at the time. Walking Away was on a CD. It's funny, like a CD. It was doing the rounds. Rewind was already starting to make moves. And I think we possibly got to the point where I'd released Feel Me In, the first single. And he was the kind of guy that was always a prank here, there, and he just always had the joke. And one day I'm sitting in his living room and he just says like, there's someone on the phone for you, there's someone on the phone for you. I was like, okay, cool. Well, who's on the phone then? Puffy's on the phone. I was like, okay, cool, tell him to call me back later. It's fine. It just, the Puffy on the phone. There's no Puffy on the phone. There's going to be some joker that I was going to speak to who's going to sound like Puffy. I goes, okay, hand me the phone. So I take the phone off him. And I hear his voice, and he's giving me the spiel about, oh man, we love you, man, over here. We wanna fly you over to be part of the Bad Boy family. Jump on the private jet, jump over. And I'm like, okay, cool, yeah. Where's the jet, man? Tell me. Is it like, pull me up in Luton. I'm ready to go. So I'm in with the banter. And there's a moment where I was like, this voice sounds very good though. And then he said the word "take that," yeah, which is something that he says on the front of every one of his records. He does this take that, bad boy. And when he said that in past, I was like, this actually is Puff Daddy. And the mad thing is, I've been being a bit of a joker, Mr. Jester, for the last like 3-4 minutes. And then it dawned on me. I was like, I'm talking to Puff Daddy, and I just had this. This dropped. It dropped in, and I was like, whoa. And I thought it was possibly going to be a chance where I was going to be signed to Bad Boy in America. And it kind of didn't transpire, but the fact that I got to speak to Puffy in my manager's living room in Maidenhead was just the juxtaposition was lovely.
Well, there's loads of juxtapositions in the book, because then you talk about your nan and her organisation, your organisation, and you've always been very organised, haven't you? I mean, that is one of your signature traits. Definitely.
I mean, my grandma's, like, God rest her soul, like Lily. She growing up with my mum and grandma predominantly, and the way in which they just provided for me. You know, you come back at school and there'd be the sandwiches ready, and then on the way get back and you have the tea ready for you, and it'd just be extra love. And the way she made the chicken stew was just some kind of. My mum would try and make the chicken stew, but it would never taste the same as my grandma's. but being brought up in that environment really helped nurture the way I write songs. I mean, I was always around a lot of feminine energy, and I think that kind of, even when I sing like songs like 7 Days, it was like you're saying making love as opposed to what I could have been saying as a 17-year-old kid at the time. It was always like trying to be respectful in and around that, and I think it really served me well, because playing Terence Trent D'Arby, we talk about how poetic he was on songs. I mean, in her Strawberry Eyes, the way she sees me signifies that she's susceptible to my velvet lies. I mean, who's saying that on Let Her Down Easy? That's the kind of stuff I grew up listening to. So
I think it's so cool.
Amazing.
Your dad gets an early shout out as well, because he did his bit. My dad could see how passionate I was about writing songs when I was about 11. He surprised me with the best present I could ask for, a Studio 100 hi-fi system. Tell us about that. Come on.
To anyone that knows about a Studio 100 hi-fi system, one, it was like a huge, like the old school TV. Had a record deck on the top.
Bigger than this building.
Bigger than the building. 2 twin tape deck. Loads of faders and lots of microphones with different coloured like foam capsules on the top. It was the first time that I got the chance to actually do some sort of recording where you dub onto the tape. So you'd record onto the first tape, maybe the lead line. You put it in the tape deck below, you put another tape in the top, you then record some harmonies, and then you keep swapping it backwards and forwards, so you could keep layering and layering. But back in the day, if you knew, it's deteriorating the quality of the tape.
You lose your generation.
Oh, those D90 tapes, or if you had a chrome one, that, you know, it was saucy if you had a chrome one, or maybe a metal one, £2.49. That was a lot of money for those tapes. But it was the first leaning into studio, making my own song, and the first song I actually did on that was a song called I'm Ready, and that song ended up being a competition that I went in for Damage, the group, and it ended up winning that competition and was on the B-side of Wonderful Tonight, the single they released, the Eric Clapton cover, which it's funny because you actually work with Eric Clapton and do so much stuff with Kwame does. So it's just like there's a lot of full circle. But I always thought it was like it went to number 3 in the charts because of I'm Ready, and I was like, I think it might be because of the amazing classic of Wonderful Tonight. But yeah, it set me on my tone.
You were 14 when you did that, weren't you?
14 years old, yeah.
Amazing. And in many ways, that piece of equipment, it sort of carved out your style, didn't it?
Totally.
You know, and it's gone on from since then, but it's still there. It's still at the heart of everything you do, which is so cool. And thank heaven your dad bought you that. You know, It's so cool. I mean, you know, right place, right time. We're all where we're meant to be. You know, we're exactly where we're meant to be today. You talk about the Miami years in the book. Fascinating. I didn't know that the whole Bo Selector thing had such. I knew it had an effect on you. Of course it did. Why wouldn't it? But I didn't realise. You know, you actually relocated because of that to Miami. There's all that. There's a brilliant story about the Brits, which sounds like the stories from hell, because Craig was nominated for 6 Brits, unprecedented. Nominated for 6 Brits, unbelievable, completely justified. Everybody agreed, and then the news slipped out just before the Brits themselves. The word on the street was that Craig hadn't won any, and of course they do rehearse the Brits. Anyway, it came to the night. Craig sitting at the table with his family, in the full knowledge, or the suspected knowledge, that he's not going to win any. So a bittersweet moment. But then. What happened? Almost better than not winning one were these crazy tributes that started to unfold throughout the night.
Totally. I mean, you got to imagine like the Brit Awards and what that meant to a young kid, and watching that show. And yes, I knew that I wasn't going to be taken any away, but I was still in awe of the fact that I was actually there. I'm sitting at the table and my family are there, and then it just seemed like everyone who went up to accept an award or present an award was mentioning what was going on. So Dane Bowers had gone up and he was wearing a Craig was robbed t-shirt, I think. And I was just like, wow, what a lovely gesture. You didn't have to do that, you know. You could have just gone up and done your thing. Elton John walking up onto stage and saying if there was a better singer in the UK than Craig David, then he was Margaret Thatcher. And I'm thinking, wow, this is Elton John. And I think the icing on the cake really for me was I'm listening to U2 singing One, and amazing song. And the backstory of my song Walking Away was that I originally recorded that over the instrumental of One, and I couldn't get the clearance for it, which was fine, and I kind of expected that. So we replayed it and got it so it became Walking Away. So I'm there singing it, I'm there watching it, and I watch U2 perform the song, and then they transition into Walking Away, and I'm seeing Bono singing One on stage, and I'm just thinking, what is going on here? And for me, that really sort of defined a beautiful moment, because in some ways, like not winning a Brit Award, and I mean, it's been 22 years now, and I've been nominated many more times at the Brits, and to have not won one, it's almost like, it's one of those things that I see that actually the longevity of a career and those memories and those moments and the things you do within that period of time is really what it's all about. And almost the award now, I mean, like, if I was ever nominated and I'd won one, I'd appreciate and accept it, but it just means something different. At that time, it probably would have been different, like to have picked up an award. But now I see defining yourself by an award or a chart position or a number is not what it's about.
Numbers.
Yeah.
Numbers can be useful, but can be terrible, can't they, as well? But you would not have been validated on the night by any of those people had you won the awards. They did it because they knew you weren't going to win because it was in the papers the day before. And to have the validation from your peers and your heroes, that stays in your heart forever.
Yeah.
That's not a tick in a box, is it?
Absolutely. And it was funny because it was in the same time where it was almost like them with the Mobos. I'd end up getting my first award at the Mobos, and I ended up getting 3 that night. And it just sort of it landed that place for me where it was a kind of, I didn't see that there was actually anything bad about not really winning, because at the time I was just like in awe of, like, I've got a #1 album, I'm traveling the world and I'm doing all these things. But it's funny you picked up on leaving the UK, and it was interesting because that for me was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with in my life, because the UK is home to me, and I think what Bo Selector had done at the time and that bullying that had gone on for so many years, it was so hard for me, and I never really spoke on it, but to actually leave and go to Miami and play it out like, oh, I just want to be in the car and the Miami lifestyle, to actually be back here and to see the love, especially when I came back like in 2016, it was the most fulfilling experience to come home to where my friends and my family are, and to see how the land, that everything's changed, the situation had changed, people have moved on, and I felt like I was able to give closure to that, which is what I talk about in the book, because it was really important for me to do that. And I just see that it was important to speak on it, because to not touch on it would have been like, it's the elephant in the room, don't talk to Craig about Bo Selector, because you know it's going to trigger. It doesn't trigger anymore. It's actually now one of those things that I feel like for anyone who's experienced bullying, it's just being accountable for what it is, and we move on. And it's here in the writing, and hopefully people can speak on it and talk on it now.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because it's that great phrase, Bruce Lee talked about, be water, go with the flow, don't ever cut against the grain, radical acceptance, all these different things. But in the moment, that's so difficult, especially when you're younger. But that's the martial artistry of life, isn't it? You take the energy in the direction it's going, and you either allow it to go, or you go with it and you use it, but you don't go against it, because that's just a waste of everything. But it takes experience to understand that. And this book, you going to Miami and the Bo Selector thing, and then coming back and playing Glastonbury, none of that happens unless all the other stuff happens before it. And it's just life.
Chris, you're so right. And in hindsight, you don't see it in the moment, because it feels so heavy, it feels so difficult. Yeah, and it was a spiral into depression, and something that now I can actually speak on in the book, because I think until you've actually experienced those things, then you're kind of very passive in any explanation or ways to get through. Me giving you an affirmation, it's not going to really help you if you haven't really experienced depression yourself. So for me to have gone there to a really dark place, which I thought Mr. Positivity, the one who always reframes things as positive, to have experienced that and then be able to speak on it, I just feel like by doing that, it opens the conversation that someone else who will be listening to this will say, you know what, if he's experienced, then maybe I can talk to someone about that too. And I kind of feel that that's now my being of service. It's like 22 years of the career I'm so grateful for, and long may that continue. But what is the real work you're doing? Are you really going to help people now and use that platform of people who've listened to you, who believe in the things that you speak about? What are you going to do now? And I get the memo. It's like, okay, cool. So the book is one part, the way I speak about my truth. The music is part of it, and it's like a lotus petal with being multifaceted. They're all part of the same flower, but we have different things.
Well, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the lotus flower. You can't have the lotus without the mud. You have to have the mud, man.
Yeah.
The most beautiful flower in the world can't exist without mud. Absolutely. And that's life for you. You know,
really
we're
is.
all a lotus just waiting to happen.
Totally.
And embrace the mud. Slap it on. Slap it all over.
It really is. And to anyone,
it's very good for the skin as well.
It's great for the skin. It's like the fountain of youth in of itself. But like, if anyone's in the mud and thinking, but there will always come a day where you'll see the light. And I really want to like land that, because I know people are going through it and they can't see where to go. And I think they're looking for people who can shine light on things. And like I say in the book, I'm a journeyman. I haven't got all the answers. I'm learning as much as everyone else. And life will always throw you a curveball to say, okay, you're saying you're living this life now, let's test you. And they'll test you in the multitude of ways. But the more you find resilience in the sense of leaning into your vulnerability. When Brené Brown speaks so beautifully
she sent you the memo.
This.
You said you got the memo. It came from her, didn't it?
It really did. I mean, I was on the boardwalk in Miami running, and I'm listening to an audiobook, and I'm just like, I've actually been recording the audiobook this week of this.
Right.
And it had this real weird juxtaposition, because I was like talking about that part where I'm running on the boardwalk, listening to Brené Brown. She's talking about the power of vulnerability. I'm feeling like she's talking to me, while I'm doing an audiobook, thinking, I hope that I land this in a way that someone else is running or doing something in their life and hearing this, and it lands with them too. So I was just thinking, for the greater good, sometimes what my voice does give, which the book can only give to a certain degree, is that there's a certain vibration. And that's why people love you when you're on the radio, because they hear your tone and they know if you're speaking the truth. Because you can say something, but it's the tone, it's the vibration.
It's the tone. It's how you say anything. It's how you say everything. Just recorded the audiobook. Is it out soon, or? Do
you know, I'm actually recording it as we speak. I think it'll be in the top of the new year. But it's an incredible experience doing that when you're actually speaking those words. Because I always found that you have to be super articulate for a book, writing a book anyway, because you need to land the words. I can't use melodies to kind of like to reinforce it. But when you're doing an audiobook, you also then have to really find, again, the tone of when you're landing certain stories. Wow, I've been living it, living my own book.
So you go off for your major sabbatical in Miami for how many years was it in the end? 6,
I was
7?
There for about, 5, 6
years. And then you come back, to this tumultuous welcome, one that you didn't even know was waiting for you, or even possible again within your own lifetime on this particular planet, in this particular world. You play Glastonbury, and I'm thinking, sunny uplands, what could possibly go wrong? But of course, when you realised that even that was fixed, there was still a hole that needed to be filled or to be recognised. And I got up to 2019.
Right.
And Lorraine, you met Lorraine Kelly. You went on a trip with Lorraine, didn't you? That was an interesting story. Just speak to a bit of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Do you know what it was? Is that I was just longing for connection and to be seen. I think that was kind of the thing that we all long for deep down. And I'd gone to Miami to try and do this whole new shiny me, to be connected, and I couldn't find it there. Got all the things, the material things, wasn't found there.
You got a body fat index of 4.5% or something like that?
Doing crazy kind of bodybuilding stuff, which I was thinking, why am I doing this? And even then, it wasn't found there. And even that kind of goes back to triggers of not even being overweight as a kid. And that was the funny thing as well, because I felt like the culture had kind of like at school had kind of thrown in that if you were carrying some weight, I could run as fast as any of the people in my school, that somehow that it was sort of inferior and you were other and you were the shoulder to cry on for the girl who was really into the captain of the school football team, who had the six-pack. And then it locks in and you get that memo and you think, okay, now I have to go out and get that and then I will be seen. And this is crazy. At the same time, I'm having all this wonderful success with my music, yet that wasn't enough. You have to get the body. So I had to talk on that, come back. And then when I was with Lorraine on the desert trek, and it was when the Desert Trek kicked in like 2 or 3 days in, and it started to become...
What was it for first of all?
So we were there. We were trying to raise money for people who were suffering with cataracts in villages that were deep in the Desert Trek, and I felt like that when I had really seen what was going on, this was past the facade of, oh, you've gone out there and there's some celebrities who are kind of doing this. Like, no. We've actually come here to actually do this, and actually is wearing thin on a lot of people. People were actually feeling that they were away from home and they were missing their kids, and they were starting to get blisters all over their feet doing this trek. And I saw Lorraine was suffering for a moment, and she was keeping it to herself. She was really gracious at the best of times. I just went over there and I just, look, get your socks off. Come on, get your feet out. And I just started to give a little massage on the feet. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was just like, give it a little massage. I think, let me get around that blister there. Don't worry, I got you, don't worry. And there was this bonding experience where she was really felt seen and felt the love that I was giving her. And then she opened up about how she was missing Rosie and her family back home. And I was just like, wow, I missed that. I missed that part where there's someone at home waiting for me there. And we bonded in such a beautiful way. And I've got so much love for Lorraine because, again, it's people who talk so highly of you when you're not necessarily in the limelight, and there's moments where you're going through a bit of a period. She'd always somehow bring me up on the show and say, yeah, a lovely man, Craig. A really lovely guy. I wonder how Craig is. And it was those things that really meant so much, because it's all good and well when everything's going great. Everyone's your best friend and a big arm around your shoulder. But she always kind of said that, and I had to say to her, you're like an angel that's always been in the background there. And that moment on the Desert Trek was amazing. We're talking about the basic things, just to be able to see, but you see how people make the best of it, and there's those things really landed for me too. So what amazing trek it was. Yeah. It was a great time.
What's instructive to me from what you've just said is that you can't miss the basics if you're not there to miss them. Absolutely. And you weren't there, were you? And you had to, that's all that was missing. It wasn't everything else. It was you, wasn't it? And you'd constructed this other identity so many times, as we all do on a daily basis, depending on, how big the magnifying glass is when we wake up. And you construct this identity, and it's just not who we are. And they talk about onion. We're like an onion, totally. And you're born, and and then you start layering yourself, and in the end, you're unrecognizable. And not only can other people not get in, but you can't get out.
Absolutely.
And it's a question of, right, okay, let's start peeling back these layers.
And that's the hardest thing. And anyone who says, like I said, say a few affirmations, just go on a yoga retreat, just do a few meditations. And I lean into all of the spiritual practices because there is a place for them. But if you bypass the hard things in life, then you are just doing that. You're bypassing it. And that's the one thing that I had to kind of learn too. It's like, you know what? The tests and the lessons are going to come, and you've got support around you. So know that's the first thing. But also, you need to lean into them, because actually there is a blessing in disguise. Because once you unravel the onion, you get back to it, you're like, okay, we're here. We're here again. And
my favourite phrase about being over positive, because you talk about it so beautifully in your book, because for a positive there has to be a negative. If you just focus on the positive, bear in mind, mark my words, your negative is outside in the car park doing push-ups, waiting for you, right? And that's what you have to go and meet the negative, man. Yeah. You're going to have to work out with the negative as much as the positive, and then it's all right then.
It's so true. I say about the magnet in the book about shaving off parts of it. Keep shaving off. Yeah. But trust me, you're getting closer and closer to
your demons are in the car park doing push-ups 24/7, 365 days a year. Don't pretend they're not going to come back and get you, because they're waiting for you, baby.
Totally. and do you know what the funny thing is? And the great thing when I see this in animated movies, or I see it in kids' movies. Willy Wonka's my favourite movie of all time. And I think there's a lot of symbolism within that. But in the movie Soul, or the animation, the Pixar movie, it really does show that once you integrate that part, that's the shadow and the dark side and the negative, you integrate it, is when you become whole. And I had to learn that this positive thing of reframing everything as positive, this is positive. When I had a really bad back injury, which I talk about in the book, there was no way of reframing that. I was feeling it and I was spiraling into a place, and it was only when I accepted that was what it was, it became a bit lighter. It was like, okay, we haven't got that put on the shiny grin and the smiling face and like, okay, cool, and do the performance. It's like, no, I'm suffering here. And doctors aren't helping me here. And I know that it's because I'm not actually accepting that I'm actually in pain, and I need to find help and talk about this. And from doing that, it was a long process. I'm not saying any of this, again, anyone who says, yeah, you know, just lean into it, accept it, and it's going to be cool tomorrow. No. Maybe it might happen for certain things, but this can be a long process, but it always gets lighter. And then once you get to the end of the tunnel, you're like, okay, I can now speak on this. So I think anyone who's suffering out there, and I've said this to my current manager, Colin, who's been with me like 22 years, and he suffered with cancer, and it was a really hard time, like in the last year. And I was like thinking, why Colin? Why am I managing someone I love so much? Like, why is it happening to you? And he got through it, and I'm so grateful that he's got through it. But I said to him also, you can speak on this now. You can speak to people about cancer. You can speak to them about how it feels and where your mind takes you, and be able to actually land this in a way that now you're an advocate for helping people. You can now be a mentor. You can you become a teacher through your adversities. And I think that's what I learned. It's like, wow, if you get it hard in your life, you took up the teacher mentor role when you came in this time. You're like, I need to speak on these things.
Yeah, well, you know, when you go to the gym, the weights only get lighter if you lift them first. You can't just look at them. You have to lift the weights,
You're
man.
great. It's absolutely
That's
that.
the deal, isn't it?
So is that.